Friday afternoon, which means it is time for Millionaire Maker winner myself, Neil Orfield, to break down the upcoming NFL main slate week 5 on tap. So as you guys come in, do us a big favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We appreciate all that. Helps keep our content free. And also, we're sponsored today by DraftKings Rainmakers. And if you guys haven't checked it out yet, use the link below in the description box because you're going to get a totally free starters pack. 100% free. You're going to get players to help you build out a lineup. Entire lineup comes in that pack. It's a free pack. You have a chance to win real cash prize. So take advantage of that because you have a chance to turn free stuff into some real money, which always sounds pretty good. So, Neil, we had some news that dropped right before the show started. Jonathan Taylor signing a new contract extension. We'll get into that. But first, how are you doing? And how was week 4 for you?
Week 4. So I lost a little bit in week 4. I thought I was going to make money like all day until the Christian McCaffrey final touchdown. Excuse me. I had like 19% Christian McCaffrey, but below the field, and he wasn't in any of my good lineups. So he was just killing me at the end. I went from like winning, not a significant, like hundreds of dollars, not like thousands, but like hundreds of dollars. And I thought I was going to hold on, stay up there, but just the McCaffrey going completely off kind of ruined my day. How did yours go?
Yeah, it was my worst week of the season to this point. If somebody got injured last week, they were like a core part of my lineups. That was just how it went for me. It was any injury. All the injuries just negatively impacted me. And even before the slate started, where when we were doing this show last Saturday, my most exposed quarterback at the time, Neil, in the game I was really building stacks around, it was that Las Vegas Chargers game. I had Jimmy Garoppolo as my most exposed quarterback. I had a lot of Garoppolo. I had a lot of Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, and Keenan Allen running it back. And then what ends up happening, we had Jimmy Garoppolo, who was expected to play all week. He gets ruled out. Then I didn't really want to play Aiden McConnell. I didn't like the Raiders receivers anymore. I like Keenan Allen less. It just screwed up everything for me. And then I just never really liked my lineups. And then just everything went to shit by the time the slate rolled around. Also, like I had like a bunch of Kenny Pickett lineups. He bangs his knee up during the game and then just sucked and had to come out for a point. So it was a rough slate for me. And looking forward to week 5 where we could right the ship because it has been a really good football season for me. And I'm hunting it, Neil. You know, I'm trying to join you. I want to win a Million Maker myself, as does most of the people watching. That's why we're here talking about football, trying to go through our lineups and talk with each other about what we like, what we don't like, and try to bounce some strategies off of each other. But first, let's talk about Jonathan Taylor, because usually we don't have news of this magnitude that drops right before a football show starts. So we'll talk about quarterbacks and all the positions like we normally do. But first, what do you make of Jonathan Taylor signing, and does it have any DFS impact for this week?
It doesn't really have any DFS impact for me this week just because I didn't really want to play. I wasn't going to play Zach Moss against the Titans. I don't really have interest. I didn't really have interest in playing Jonathan Taylor against the Titans unless he was going to come in at significantly like under 1% ownership. And now we get news that he is on a snap count anyway. So to me, it's not all that impactful. I wasn't going to play any running back from the Colts backfield. And even with the sign-in, I'm not going to play any running backs from the Colts backfield here. I'm trying to think if it impacts the passing game at all, because it's a nice spot for the Colts passing game also. I guess so. If anything, I would say it's a positive having Jonathan Taylor out there for some snaps, just going to help the offense hum along a little bit better. So I guess if it has any impact for me, it would be a very slight boost to the Colts passing game, but not significant. Any significant impact for you?
You know, it might actually make me like Anthony Richardson a little bit less because now you have to figure the team gets to the 1 yard line. Is Anthony Richardson as likely to run it in? Probably not, but Richardson was probably a quarterback I wasn't going to get a ton of anyway. I've got all my stuff updated for the show and looking at my, exposures at different positions. And I don't have a lot of Richardson. I don't assume I was going to anyway, but it is something that I think could hurt his touchdown potential a little bit in this spot. But yeah, we're going to have a lot of injury situations to talk about, and probably the most injury just impacted slate we've seen to this point. We've done the show on Saturday because we've got Amon-Ra St. Brown out. That's something that has a big impact on value. We've also got Cooper Kupp back in the mix. That has a big impact on what we could expect out of the pass catchers for the Rams. But where we always start here, Neil, is the quarterbacks and who are building some of our stacks around. And at the high end, we have popular quarterbacks this week. And it's something that we haven't had quite as much of in the last couple of weeks. We did at the start of the season where some of the high-priced quarterbacks were popular. But for this slate, we have ownership going to Jalen Hurts at north of 10%, Patrick Mahomes at north of 10%, Tua north of 10%, Joe Burrow north of 10% on DraftKings. And then on FanDuel, the quarterbacks were more than 10% owned. Pretty similar names, but Jalen Hurts, Tua, Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow are actually the exact same across the two different sites. The one thing I was looking at first where it looked different was that I had Josh Allen also in the mix, but he's not on the main slate. So yeah, same 4 quarterbacks that are going to be popular in both, and they're all, big name stud quarterbacks. If you were paying up at QB, Neil, do you have a preference this weekend?
Yeah, I think it is probably Mahomes for me, and probably not getting too cute with my pass catching pairings. Maybe I'll throw in a share of Rashee Rice or something here for the Chiefs. Maybe I should speak. I'm speaking too early, saying I won't get too cute because I always get too cute with the Chiefs pass catchers. But for the most part, it's going to be Mahomes with Kelsey. We have Mahomes coming in 12% projected ownership, 13% chance of being the top stack. I think for me, I'm just going to throw out Joe Burrow this week. And I actually played a significant amount of Joe Burrow last week, sort of accidentally played more than I intended to with Joe Burrow last week. Didn't go well for me at all. Now we've got him at over 10% ownership. And part of the reason that I wanted to play some of him last week is I thought he was going to be like 1% owned. He ended up being like 5% owned, which kind of changes everything with, at that level. This week we have Joe Burrow projected for 10% ownership, and to me that is too much for a player who hasn't shown anything this year. He's clearly hobbled out there. I think at this level of ownership, I'm jumping off the Joe Burrow train. I think the other 3, I'm going to have a good amount of all of the other 3, those being Jalen Hurts, Tua, and Mahomes. I think those 3 all look great. Burrow's the one stand I'm taking on the high end. I'm just not getting to Burrow. What are you doing with these guys?
Yeah, so I think the quarterbacks, the high end, look a little bit different across the two different sites because, and this is really going to be shown out in our top stacks tool that we have for football. Because if you look at DraftKings right now, we have the team with the highest odds being the top scoring stack as the Philadelphia Eagles, and a team that's also going a little bit under-owned over on DraftKings. We got 14% ownership going to Jalen Hurts. We got the team with a 15.2% chance to be the top scoring stack. Whereas on FanDuel, we have Jalen Hurts a little bit over-owned with 18% ownership and 13% chance to be the highest scoring stack on FanDuel. Whereas we've got Patrick Mahomes standing out on FanDuel with a 19.5% chance for the Chiefs to be the top scoring team relative to a 14.2% ownership going to him. So on DraftKings, I prioritize spending up for Jalen Hurts. On FanDuel, a little bit more of a priority to get to Patrick Mahomes. I think both of them look really good overall, but DraftKings, a little bit overweight to Jalen Hurts, a little bit underweight to Mahomes, then vice versa over on FanDuel. But I think this is a pretty good slate to pay up at quarterback, particularly because of all the value that we're getting at wide receiver with the Lions situation. Amon-Ra St. Brown getting ruled out, and then also particular for DraftKings, Wan'Dale Robinson being min-priced. It's just easy to spend up at other positions, which hasn't always been the case this year. It's generally been wide receiver I'm looking to pay up, which is to an extent the case this week. But don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but it is important as for how it impacts my quarterback exposure. And then also I'm getting to a good amount of Tua here as a pay up quarterback. But like you, Neil, of the quarterbacks that are popular, I'm getting to the least of Joe Burrow. He just hasn't been 100%. I'm prioritizing to get to more of Mixon in the backfield. It seems like you're a little bit underweight to Joe Burrow as well. Are there any pay up quarterbacks that are not picking up ownership that you maybe like a little bit more than the field?
In terms of pay up quarterbacks, let me sort by salary real quick. No, maybe. I mean, I'm going to have a good amount of Kirk Cousins. I don't know if he would qualify as, I guess he's not double digit. If you qualify Kirk Cousins at 6,900 as a pay up option, definitely going to love me some Kirk Cousins this week. Anthony Richardson, I think, is pretty interesting, because it is a pass funnel there in Tennessee, and obviously a lot of what you get out of Anthony Richardson is on the ground. So it feels like it's going to hurt him on the ground potentially, but then he's just airing it out more. It's going to be more opportunities, and he's got a monster arm, more opportunities down the field for some big plays. So actually, I do really like Anthony Richardson as well. So yeah, I guess I would throw those two in as well, coming in at relatively low ownership, Richardson and Kirk Cousins, both in great spots. I don't think I'm going to get too much, if any, Lamar Jackson. Yeah, I feel he actually looks pretty good in the top stacks tool, so maybe that'll change because we've got Lamar Jackson at 1% ownership, 2.5% chance of Baltimore being the top stack. So I might be speaking too soon. And I don't know that I'll necessarily be under the field there. Like if I get to 1 or 2 shares of Lamar Jackson, I'll be right with the field. But I'd say Kirk Cousins probably of that group, the one that I'm the most interested in, followed by Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, so for me, getting to some of Kirk Cousins, not as much of Anthony Richardson, kind of related to what we talked about at the top, where it's so much of his fantasy value has come from his rushing ability and his touchdowns, and it's not a great rushing matchup against the Titans. And then also, I think Jonathan Taylor could vulture some of those goal line attempts. And then if you look at Anthony Richardson's numbers so far this year, we just haven't seen much of out of him in the passing game to this point. So it might be part of his overall quarterback ability that's lagging behind relative to his rushing ability from a fantasy upside. So I don't think I'm going to be getting to very much of Richardson. My initial runs, I have him 1% on DraftKings, and I have him in 3% of my FanDuel lineup. So very, very limited amount of Anthony Richardson for me. But there are some cheap quarterbacks that I like getting to. And I'm curious which ones stand out to you, if any, Neil, because there's a couple that are catching my eye.
Yeah, so the tough thing for me is I really loved some ugly spots for quarterbacks when I did the ownership show with Lofty. Now I'm looking at the top stacks tool, and they're all coming in much higher owned than we anticipated. So I thought Daniel Jones was going to be completely, everybody watched the primetime game. Nobody's going to play Daniel Jones. Now we've got him at 6% ownership. So I think I'm still going to go there, but we have massive negative leverage in the top stacks tool. 6% ownership, 1% chance of being the top stack for the Giants. It's easy to do because they do have Wan'Dale Robinson at 3,000. But I also really think Darren Waller is interesting again this week. So I think that I will go there, but I don't have the same enthusiasm that I had on Wednesday because now we've got Daniel Jones at 6% ownership instead of like 1 or 2% ownership. And that really changes things pretty significantly in terms of the number of teams that would have him at 6% ownership. Similarly, I actually, on the other hand, so I liked Zach Wilson as an ugly play on Wednesday. We had him at 1%. He's up to 1.8% projected ownership now. I still think I like that number for Zach Wilson. I think I'm still willing to go there against this Broncos defense. And this is one of the spots where I'm going to play both sides. I'm also going to have tons of exposure to this Broncos defense against Zach Wilson because I'm not convinced yet that he's actually like a decent NFL quarterback. He might be. He looked good in the last game, but I'm not convinced that that's a sure thing just yet. So I'll have both sides of it, but I'm going to be above that 2% projected ownership that we have for Zach Wilson. And then finally, I do have interest in Ryan Tannehill against this Colts defense. He's looked bad so far this year, but in this particular matchup at 3.5% ownership, easy pairing with DeAndre Hopkins, who has a massive target share. I do have interest there as well. So those are three that really stand out to me among the cheap ones. Who do you like?
Yeah, so one of them for me is going to be Ryan Tannehill. And it's funny. So if I'm going to give my logic for liking Ryan Tannehill, and based on it, I think you're going to very easily be able to figure out who the other cheap end quarterback I like is. So Ryan Tannehill, his price is cheap. He hasn't played all that well this year. And by the way, not the reasons I like him playing shitty is not the reason I like him this year. But with Treylon Burks out for this weekend, it's just easy to know where the targets are going to in this offense. Like it's already been DeAndre Hopkins, who's been a target monster. He's not all that expensive himself either. And now you've got him at a reasonable price tag, likely getting even more targets. And then Chigakonku at tight end. Tight end is a position that there are a couple guys that I like, but it's just been a really difficult position to fill this year because some of the players that we have been relying on in the past have just not been consistent, like Mark Andrews this year, like Dallas Goedert. So it's been tough to fill the tight end position. Chigakonku likely going to be seeing more targets. So I like Tannehill stacked with Okonkwo. I like Tannehill stacked with Hopkins. It makes him easy to get to. So, Neil, if there's a quarterback that I like just because it's easy to figure out value for his pass catchers, who do you think the other quarterback I might like is?
Jared Goff with Amon-Ra St. Brown out?
Yeah, Jared Goff with no Amon-Ra St. Brown. It's the most favorable situation for value at pass catchers now. So, when I look at my wide receiver exposures on DraftKings, like there's just so many good cheap options to get to now. But amongst the top of them, it's Wan'Dale Robinson and Khalif Raymond over on DraftKings. So I get to both of them in a handful of lineups. And then over on FanDuel, we don't have quite the same cheap price point on Robinson, so he's a little bit less of a priority. But Khalif Raymond is my favorite overall value play over on FanDuel. So on both those sites, I think Jared Goff makes a whole lot of sense. And points per dollar, I think you make a really strong case that on both FanDuel and DraftKings, the top overall tight end roster is now Sam Laporta. He is my most rostered tight end on both FanDuel and DraftKings. So if Khalif Raymond is one of my favorite value plays on DraftKings, my favorite value play on FanDuel, and Sam Laporta is my favorite tight end play on both sites, it just kind of makes sense that I would land on Jared Goff as well.
Yeah, no, that does make a lot of sense. Yeah, Sam Laporta, a guy that I'm going to have a lot of interest in. Yeah, man, I hate so much that Amon-Ra St. Brown is out. We don't need to get into the reasons, but Amon-Ra being out is painful to me. But yeah, I do like that it just is going to lift up all these cheap pass catchers for Detroit in a primo matchup with the Panthers. The running backs too. Like I think everybody in the offense like gets a boost in terms of the share of the offense that you can expect from them. So yeah, I like that call.
Yeah, and I have an interesting take at running back too about the Lions pass catchers. I think based on some of that, Tony might be able to figure out where I'm going to be going with this. Yeah. And we'll talk about the running backs here in a second. If you guys haven't done it, I see some more people coming in. Do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. But Neil, let's go ahead and start talking about some of these running backs. And is there anything you're really loving at the high end for running back this week? We don't have a Christian McCaffrey out here this week because he's not on the slate. So if you look at the pay up options, we've got Saquon Barkley, who's still questionable to play. We've got Bijan Robinson. We've got Derrick Henry, who kind of shit in my face, but I said maybe he's starting to, be aged a little bit. Maybe we're starting to see him get washed, and maybe the bounce back for Derrick Henry won't come. And boy, he crushed last week, even through.
You didn't see the jump pass. Yeah.
So it looks like Derrick Henry is back on the straight and narrow and providing fantasy upside again. But between Barkley, Robinson, and Derrick Henry, do you preferred spend up option for this week of the three of them? Barkley obviously being questionable. That has him with really low ownership. Don't know what his status is going to be. Robinson is chalk at 22.5% projected ownership on DK. Henry 13.4% as more of a play kind of in the middle. Do you have a preference for you in terms of spend up RB?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to ignore Bijan Robinson there. Just like he gets enough volume. Now he's facing this total run funnel defense of the Texans. I think Bijan looks great. And it's not like he's like 9,000 either. We got Bijan at 7,700. The price is totally reasonable there for Bijan. So he would be my favorite of the spend up options. He is the one to me that just looks like kind of a no-brainer play. Like anytime you get a guy who has this much volume and this much talent going up against a defense like the Texans, who are just going to allow you to run all over them. I like Bijan quite a bit. He would be the top option there for me. It is interesting, like seeing that positive leverage on Derrick Henry makes me like sort of want to consider him at the top option. But for me, it's going to be Bijan followed by Derrick Henry. How about you?
Yep, same. Bijan followed by Derrick Henry. Even if Saquon Barkley is in, I don't envision that I'm going to be getting to a whole lot of him. Like I have all my lineups built as if he's going to be in. He didn't show up in anything for me for FanDuel or DraftKings. He's expensive. If we're looking at him over on DraftKings, he's the most expensive running back on the slate at $8,100 on FanDuel. Derrick Henry is $9,000, followed by Barkley at $8,800. So, I'm getting to in order. It's Bijan Robinson 1 for me, Derrick Henry 2, and then just not really getting to any of Saquon Barkley. And then on FanDuel, we've got a handful of other pay up options. Like David Montgomery is $8,500 on FanDuel. That's a fairly aggressive price tag. You got Raheem Mostert at $8,000, and it's hard to know what to make of the running back split between him and Devon Achane, which is where I think we should go next, Neil, because Achane's going to be super popular this week on both FanDuel and DraftKings. We have Achane at $7,500 projected for 19% ownership on FanDuel. Achane over on DraftKings at $6,100, so a little bit more of affordable price point. He is 20.5% owned. Neil, what do you make of the split in the Dolphins backfield? Achane has been impossibly efficient at this point. He's averaging like 10 yards per carry. He scores once every 4 times he touches the football. And he's got the best matchup, one of the best matchups possible against the Giants in a super favorable game script where the Dolphins are favored by a lot. So this does set up as a game where the Dolphins should be expected to run the football to some extent. But what are you expecting to happen? Is it going to be Achane? Is it going to be Mostert? Is it going to be both of them? We also have to consider the ownership. So how are you going to play the Dolphins backfield in tournaments tomorrow?
Yeah, to me, Raheem Mostert looks incredible here at under 4% projected ownership. Now, when Lofty and I did the ownership show on Wednesday, I was like, man, I'd really love to play some Mostert, except for we had him projected at 10% of the time. He's come way down in terms of projected ownership, and I love to see it. That's just going to make me want to play Mostert. It's certainly dangerous. Like I think that there is the possibility that Achane is 21% of the field gets there and he goes off because he played a significant amount last week. He does have a great matchup, but I think that the split is generally going to be more even than it was last week between Mostert and Achane. And I think Mostert is, he's still fast. He's still talented. So to me, if Mostert is going to come in at 4% ownership to Achane's 20%, to me, I'm going to be overweight to the field on Mostert and probably underweight to the field on Achane. Maybe not the second bar. Like maybe I get to Achane and just have a significant share of this Dolphins backfield. But the one that stands out to me is that Mostert is just a little bit under-owned in this spot. How are you seeing it?
It's tough. And I'm going to ask you this, though. Who do you expect to start?
Mostert.
Same. I expect Mostert to start. So overall, it's a situation where I find it hard to not get exposure to, right? Because the Dolphins are right now 12-point favorites in the game with a 47.5-point total. So at least just in terms of team total, the Dolphins are expected to score the most points. And with them being 12-point favorites, you just have to figure they're going to be running the ball in the most likely scenario in the fourth quarter of this game. And I do think Mostert is going to be the starter who gets more touches more often than not than Achane in this spot. That's how we've seen the game, how the season go to open up. People forget, like, Achane was like a healthy scratch in week one. Now, obviously, he's played himself into a situation where he's going to be playing a bunch. But the way I'm looking at it is I probably want to be somewhere around even with the field on Achane and get overweight to the field on Mostert. And I like the Dolphins passing game too. I mean, this is a team that we've seen them score 70 points as recently as a couple of weeks ago. There's clearly a lot of upside to be had here. Even in the fourth quarter, I know that they kneeled the ball instead of kicking the field goal at the end. This is a team that plays super fast. They can score a lot of points in a hurry. So I think it makes sense to get exposure to Tua, Achane, Mostert, Tyreek Hill. And I'm going to be getting to a lot of exposure to this team as a whole. But Mostert, I think, does make for a very good leverage play off of Achane in large field tournaments. What other running backs in like this high to mid-tier price range stand out to you, Neil?
Yeah, so we've talked about the high end. We've talked about the Dolphins. Again, I don't think I'm going to Jonathan Taylor at all. I don't think that I love Kyren Williams against the Eagles. I think that is kind of a stay away for me. Joe Mixon stands out in our tools. He's going to get a ton of ownership. It makes a lot of sense. Like, can't ask for a better spot than facing the Cardinals. We've got Mixon at 23% ownership, 24% chance of being optimal. I don't know that I'm going to be playing like 40-50% of Mixon. I think I'm probably going to be pretty close to the field, but that's a significant, like that's nearly a quarter of my lineups will probably have Mixon. So he's going to be a big part of my lineups. Kamara looks good in the tools. I don't fully trust Kamara yet. Like, I feel like last week was so fluky with the target share was just out of this world last week. It's a tough spot against the Patriots. So honestly, 17% ownership. We have positive leverage there, so it makes me hesitant. But to me, I see Kamara 63% ownership. 17% ownership at 6,300 against the Patriots. Feels like a stay away, but then I see the positive leverage on him. It maybe is not as big of a stay away as I want it to be, but I think I'm going to probably still be underweight to the field on Kamara, overweight or close to the field on Mixon at this level. And then, DeAndre Swift certainly is interesting. We have negative leverage there, 13% ownership, 8% chance of being optimal. Maybe not a spot for me. I'll stop there. That's the end of the 6,000 range. So I think to me, Mixon is going to get the most ownership, going to be the most interest. Oh, I skipped right over David Montgomery. David Montgomery, I mean, we talk about Amon-Ra being a boost to all of the Detroit guys. I stopped before I got to Jahmyr Gibbs, who I think is another interesting talking point. But I do think David Montgomery is going to be a big part of my lineups also. We've got him at 15% ownership, 19% chance of being optimal. He probably should have been the first that I talked of this group because, I really like David Montgomery. I'm going to have a lot of David Montgomery. I don't think you need 32 carries for him to get there this week against the Panthers. Yeah, I love David Montgomery here. So that'll end my analysis of the 6,000 and over range.
This is where most of my running back exposure is. So the Dolphins running backs, like getting to both of them. I like getting to Joe Mixon and Alvin Kamara. I know they're chalky, but I think it's warranted. And even if Alvin Kamara's target share is going to go down, which it is because he can't go up, it's still, he was targeted so many times last week. New quarterback situation with Derek Carr, and it seems he was just very comfortable to dump the ball off to Alvin Kamara. You could cut his targets by half, and if he gets 7 targets, he's still pretty likely to have a big game. So we saw zero efficiency out of Kamara last week. 14 targets, he got 13 of them for 33 yards. He rushed 11 times for 51 yards, which is not terrible from an efficiency standpoint. But if he's going to be involved this much in the passing game, or at least, close to it going forward, I do find him to be somebody, even on FanDuel, only getting a half point for a reception, still to be somebody who's pretty favorable to get to. I do think also the Bengals are going to have to keep leaning on Joe Mixon with Joe Burrow, even with all the reports that Joe Burrow is starting to look a little bit better in practice. Like, the baseline was so low. He's looked so shitty in games so far this year. In a good matchup, I think Joe Mixon is going to get a lot of the workload here against the Arizona Cardinals. Here, though, Neil, is where I'm going to be getting a little bit different at running back. I think that we could see Jahmyr Gibbs get involved in the passing game for the Lions. There's no Amon-Ra St. Brown, and I still have to – there had to be something to Dan Campbell and the Lions telling us for the season that Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be used in ways that we never expected, right? It can't just be that he's going to sit on the bench all year. Like, that can't be the expectation it took him in the first round. Where they're like, hey, wait till you guys see what we're going to do with him. You're not going to believe it. And so far, you're not playing him. I get it. I didn't expect that. Is this going to be the week that he lines up in the slot a little bit, catches some passes, especially with the absence of Amon-Ra St. Brown? There's so many targets to go around in the offense. I really like Jahmyr Gibbs as a contrarian play to get to at running back. Is it going to hit all that often? Probably not, but I could really make a case for there being a lot of upside if he's involved in the passing game. And maybe he does finish with a stat line kind of similar to what Alvin Kamara had a week ago.
Yeah, I cut myself off at that 6,000 level, Greg, because I was pretty sure that you were wanting to talk about Jahmyr Gibbs there with Amon-Ra, and yeah, I'm with you on Jahmyr Gibbs. Looks good in our tools. I think that it feels like, yes, this should be the week where they try some unique things with Jahmyr Gibbs, as they said they were going to with Amon-Ra St. Brown out. We've still got him at just 6% ownership at 5,900, which I guess makes sense. He hasn't been as involved as maybe people had hoped for. So maybe 6% ownership is not egregious, but it does feel like that is one of the ways they could go. Like, they need playmakers with Amon-Ra St. Brown out of there. Jahmyr Gibbs, the kind of guy who can break off a big play. So I like the call. I think 6% is too low. I'm going to be overweight to the field on Jahmyr Gibbs as well. I think it's a good play here.
Yeah, and people in the chat saying, isn't Gibbs questionable? Yeah, obviously if he doesn't play, then I'll end up feeling differently about him. But my intuition, at least as of now, and once again, if he's ruled out, then so be it. I could just alter my lineups. But at least as of right now, we've seen the Lions already rule out Amon-Ra, or I should say they listed Amon-Ra St. Brown as doubtful. So they've done like pretty significant injury report updates. I do feel like Jahmyr Gibbs, if they didn't expect him to play, probably would have been ruled out or made doubtful by tomorrow. But, not the biggest deal in the world. If he's ruled out, then yeah, he's not my favorite contrarian running back anymore. But for now, I am expecting Jahmyr Gibbs to play. Cheap running backs. I don't have a mass amount of exposure to the cheap guys today, but there is one that stands out to me, Neil. Any that catch your eye that are priced below that 6K price point?
I mean, Pacheco's sort of interesting against the Vikings defense. Like, hard to not want to play some, but he's coming in at 12% ownership. So like, I'm probably going to be underweight to the field there. I think it's as good of a spot as you can hope for, but still probably not getting to a ton there. I think maybe some Breece Hall at 5,400. Again, we have him up at 11% ownership. So like, I have interest. It's a great spot against that Denver run defense that has been just giving up massive games. But now he's up at 11% ownership. I don't know that I'm going to be jamming it. I think that I will have, so like I might be close to the field. Like, despite the negative leverage in the boom bust tool, I still suspect that I will be close to, possibly even above the 11%. I do think it is the 5,400 price tag against this Broncos pass defense. Like, he hasn't been great overall this season, but he has shown flashes of being able to take advantage of a broken defensive play. So I do think that that possibility is there for Breece Hall. So yeah, I guess I should say, yes, I do have interest there. Breida, I will have interest in if Saquon is out. Otherwise, not going to play him if Saquon is in. Maybe some going back to remember week 1, somebody asked about Tyler Algier, and it seemed like couldn't really make a case for playing Algier, and then he put up 2 touchdowns or something. Maybe this is another spot where you can consider Algier in this spot against that Texans run defense. Like, you're just banking on that defense being so bad. He's 4,700. If he can get 16 carries, that might be enough for 100 yards and a touchdown at 4,700. You can sign me up for that. So I would throw Tyler Algier in there as well. I think that's all the running backs I really have interest in.
Do you know how many yards per carry Breece Hall is averaging this year, Neil?
I'm going to guess 4.5.
6.6.
Damn.
The issue with his production has just been the Jets have been overly cautious with him. And he looked so good in week 1 that I felt like, hey, maybe some of these restrictions are a little bit fugazi with Breece Hall, and we're just going to see him have a massive year. And then he just hardly touched the ball in subsequent games. So we saw Breece Hall week 1 against Dallas, 10 carries for 127 yards. And you start to think like, all right, 10 carries, like it's got to go up from there. He was on a snap count restriction. And then he goes 4 carries for 9 yards in the next game against the Dallas Cowboys. And then I was kind of like, okay, that's weird. I don't really know what to expect from Breece Hall going forward. So he's kind of been all over the place, but we now have 4 games under his belt. He was targeted 4 times last week. He got 6 carries for 56 yards, which I know it doesn't seem like a ton, but that's still 9.3 yards per carry. It seems like the word coming out of the Jets this week is that Breece Hall is going to have some of those restrictions lifted. I think he's full go this week. I think this is as cheap as his price point is going to be the rest of the season. And he's also in a great matchup against the Denver Broncos. So I think that we're going to see Breece Hall finally see that uptick in touches. And if we knew coming into the game that he was going to get 20 touches, 18 touches, I think he'd be the most popular running back on the entire slate. So I think he's underpriced. I think he's a little bit under-owned for the opportunity as well. So Breece Hall is a cheap guy who I'm definitely going to be getting to. I think Breece Hall makes a whole lot of sense. And then as far as cheaper guys go, like he's fairly cheap. He's just above 6K on FanDuel. He's $5,400 on DraftKings. There's not too many running backs I really love below that, though.
Yeah, as it's like Tyler Algier, I think you can throw in a dart in a large field contest only. But outside of that, yeah, I don't see any sub 5,000 guys that I really love here. Like you could play some Jerick McKinnon, but he hasn't, even in the game where he scored 2 touchdowns, he put up like 16 fantasy points. Wasn't exactly necessary, and I don't really see anybody else that I want to play down there.
Yeah, and I mean the other thing too, we're about to talk about the wide receivers, and this is where this slate is a little bit different from like last week, where last week there was all these high-end wide receivers I liked, and there was some cheaper running backs I liked. We're about to hit on wide receivers, and there's just a handful of wide receivers I think are such strong options on the cheaper end that makes it so I don't have to go super cheap at running back for this week. So we'll talk about the wide receivers in a second. But first, guys, here's one of the best ways that you can make money this weekend. We've got Bet365. They are offering a great no-brainer deal. If you sign up at Bet365 using the link below and you haven't checked out that website yet, when you sign up and you make a deposit, bet $5 on anything you like, and no matter what happens with that bet, they're going to give you $150 for free in bonus bets. Now, this is only available in a few states. The only states that have Bet365 that they're operating right now are Kentucky, Ohio, New Jersey, Virginia, Iowa, and Colorado. But if you're in one of those states and you're not taking advantage of this opportunity, you're missing out on a chance to just increase your bankroll without really doing anything or taking any risk. All you have to do is sign up, make a deposit, place a bet. If you're anybody you know has a gambling problem, call or text the number 1-800-GAMBLER. Neil, wide receiver time. And should we start at the low? Like, I feel like the low end is such a priority. We typically start at the high end, but should we just start at the low end this week?
Yeah, happy to.
So let's do it. And some of this is going to be a little bit different on DraftKings relative to FanDuel because of Wan'Dale Robinson. So let's start by talking about him. He is just mispriced on DraftKings. Yeah. He is 3K, and maybe it's because the Giants have been so bad playing these primetime games and they forgot the Giants could be on main slates or something like that. But Wan'Dale Robinson, first game of the season, he plays like 8 snaps. And on those snaps, he's targeted 5 times, catches 4 of them for 21 yards. Last week, 6 targets, 5 catches for 40 yards. He also got a rushing attempt for 7 yards. And now he's expected to basically play like a full allotment of snaps going forward. His price point hasn't changed on DraftKings, so still 3K. He's been priced up a little bit on FanDuel. For his salary, he's just such a good value. Where I've run our lineups through our simulations, and it's not like we have Wan'Dale Robinson for some obscene projection. I'm right around 11 fantasy points. That still gets him in north of 60% of my lineups when I run our lineups through the Sims because he's so egregiously mispriced. He's clearly the favorite pass catching option of Daniel Jones right now. This is a great game script for the Giants. They have to throw the football. And with Robinson getting targeted on like a third of the routes that he's running so far this year, and now he's going to get a full allotment of snaps, it's really hard for me to look past a 3K Wan'Dale Robinson. Do you feel any differently about the situation?
Yeah, I mean, 61% route participation last week. So his second game back, just a significant uptick, and wouldn't be that shocking to see the uptick continue, especially given that he's already earned 11 targets in very, very limited playing time in the past 2 games. So yeah, the 3,000 price tag is just broken on Wan'Dale. That doesn't mean he's going to pay it off. Like you see it all the time, like players that are clearly too cheap, still like just they put up 1 catch for 20 yards and that's their entire game. Certainly that is within the realm of possibility for Wan'Dale Robinson, but currently we've only got him at 13% projected ownership. So at 13% projected ownership with the broken price tag, yeah, I'm going to be in on Wan'Dale this week for sure.
Yep. And by the way, to answer a relevant question in the chat that we're going to be getting to in a little bit, Eric A wanted to know, have the Rams activated Cooper Kupp today? Yes, Cooper Kupp is activated. So he's going to be playing to some extent tomorrow, which is definitely going to have a trickle-down effect on Nakua, Tyler Higbee target shares, as well as Tutu Atwell. But yeah, the other thing too that surprised me about Wan'Dale Robinson, can you believe he's only projected for 13% ownership on DraftKings? Like, I just think that he should be uber chalk and he just isn't. He's under-owned.
Yeah, exactly. He should be. I mean, he shouldn't. I don't think he should be like 40% owned, but he should probably be 20% owned.
Yeah, that's how I feel as well. So Robinson, as of right now, my most rostered player at wide receiver. Well, actually, my most rostered player overall on DraftKings. On FanDuel, not as much, where he's still viable on FanDuel. But the difference over there is that you've got Robinson priced at $5,400 and also with no PPR bonus, just a different situation. He's in my player pool. He's just not a big piece of it like he is on DraftKings. The other thing we have to talk about is with the absence of Amon-Ra St. Brown, how are you handling the Lions wide receivers, Neil? Because this is another very clear value situation. Same kind of reason I was making a case for Jahmyr Gibbs is because where are all these targets going to go in the Lions offense? We know Laporte is going to command a lot of them, but which of the wide receivers are you looking at for cheap from Detroit?
Yeah, I mean, Khalif Raymond stands out in our tools. We expect him to get a pretty big uptick in opportunity. He's just 3,300, and we have him at just 11% projected ownership, 14% chance of being optimal. So he's honestly pretty similar to Wan'Dale. Maybe not, you don't feel as confident in Khalif Raymond because he maybe hasn't shown quite the target earning abilities as Wan'Dale, but Khalif Raymond looks pretty great here at 3,300. Josh Reynolds, 4,200, also looks pretty good, but we've got him same ownership as Khalif Raymond and 9% less chance of being optimal at 4,200. So Khalif Raymond would be the bigger priority of the receivers than Josh Reynolds. So it'd be Khalif Raymond, but I do think Josh Reynolds still in play. And then if you throw Laporte in there, you obviously have the added bonus of like you have to play a tight end, and tight ends, it's more valuable to get those points at tight end versus wide receiver. So yeah, I'm gonna love me some Sam Laporta as well.
Yeah, and we'll be talking a good amount of him at tight end because, as per usual, there aren't an abundance of great tight end options, but the ones that stand out really stand out for this week. Laporta being one of them, and this is why when we were talking about quarterbacks before, while I like Jared Goff as a quarterback on the cheaper end of the pricing range, because you got all these great cheap targets to pair him with as well. So you could play a Lions stack, you play a Lions double stack, Lions triple stack. It's not hard to envision a scenario where it pays off. And then it just gives you unlimited salary to spend at other spots as well. So, yeah, Josh Reynolds, Khalif Raymond, those are the wide receivers I'm getting the most of here. And then I'm kind of interested to hear more news on Jameson Williams in terms of what his snap count is going to be. I tend to think it's going to be very limited because everything about him has been limited to this point in his career. Maybe not his sportsbook accounts. Maybe those aren't limited, but everything else about Jameson Williams, pretty limited in terms of what we've seen from on the field. But if he is somehow unrestricted, he'd be a pretty interesting high upside boomer bust type target. Are there any other wide receivers for cheap that are standing out to you, Neil?
Yeah, I thought there was one more. Oh, Tyler Boyd at 4,500. I don't know if you call him cheap, but I expect T. Higgins to miss this week. So Tyler Boyd will step into that wide receiver 2 role for the Bengals. We've got him currently at 10% ownership. Maybe that goes up, I guess, if when T. Higgins is ultimately officially ruled out. But 4,500 Tyler Boyd against that Cardinals defense to me is very intriguing. Are you going to get to any Tyler Boyd?
So my assumption, by the way, we had news that came out, what was it, like 10 minutes ago or something like that? I was waiting to save it for when we got to wide receiver. 12 minutes ago. Kwame Lassiter II, but that's a name right out of Game of Thrones. Kwame Lassiter II. He has been activated to the Bengals active roster. With T. Higgins being listed as questionable, that's an indication to me that Higgins is not going to play. Yeah. Would you say that's probably about a fair assumption?
Yep, agreed.
So if that's going to be the case, and as of right now, when I ran lineups, I should note that we do have, at least as of now, T. Higgins officially questionable, so he's in our projections. But I do think he's going to sit, and if that is going to be the case, Jamar Chase would look a little bit better, and then as would Tyler Boyd as well. So I do think that when Higgins, I should say, is officially ruled out, it's going to be something that I'm going to want to get to. So that is a good call. Yeah,
I think Tyler Boyd is going to look good there once we have confirmation that obviously if T. Higgins plays, Tyler Boyd is, kind of what Tyler Boyd always is in that third receiver role. Like, yeah, it could happen, but it's pretty unlikely. But as a wide receiver too, like Tyler Boyd, we've seen it in the past. He will step up when one of these guys is out, so we can hope for that.
Abby Schreier's left us a super chat. Abby says he has 5 tickets to the $9 Thursday through Monday slate. There's 1,100 entries. He has Moore, Fields, and Samuel so far. Well, if you have Moore and Fields, you're off to a very good start. Yeah. Very good start if you have DJ Moore, because DJ Moore was either some combination of untackleable and the Commanders not being able to tackle.
And Samuel. And Curtis Samuel. Like, given that he was presumably low price in the contest, that's a great start.
Oh, so I was assuming he meant Deebo Samuel, but that's a good point. It's probably his Curtis Samuel, because the way that he framed that kind of makes it seem like those guys are locked in. So great start to the lineup. He's got Moore, Fields, Samuel. Then he said he's building around Bijan Robinson, Achane now, Lamb, Chase, Laporta, Conklin. He's trying to bink by varying a little bit. What are our thoughts? So let me go and look at my FanDuel lineups here. I will say Conklin is not somebody I really love today. Like, that's the one player that you've highlighted that I don't really have all that much interest in for this weekend. As for the other players there, let's see.
I mean, I love Bijan.
I don't know what the price of CeeDee Lamb is off the top of my head, just because
he's on Sunday Night Football,
the main slate. So I don't really have too much to add to there. But Bijan Robinson I don't have any issues with. Achane I don't have any issues with. Jamar Chase, now that it seems like T. Higgins is out, that really does look good. Laporta looks great. The only player that I don't really like there is Conklin.
Conklin, I guess you could make a case because they're playing the Broncos. Like, anybody can go off against the Broncos. Why not Tyler Conklin? But yeah, certainly not somebody that I have been targeting, that I've been thinking I'm going to play a lot of. CeeDee Lamb also, like, he did do great in their last matchup with San Francisco in the playoffs. I know CeeDee Lamb clearly has the ability to go off against San Francisco, but like, it's not a spot that I want to target necessarily. Anybody going up against the Niners. So I think it's a fine play. If you have 5 tickets, I don't think I'd play Lamb in 5 of 5. Like, he's certainly, there's risk there against that Niners defense, but I think you know that.
Yeah, CeeDee Lamb is, like I said, like, I haven't looked too much at him because he isn't on the main slate, but I wouldn't go crazy investing a bunch of those lineups into CeeDee Lamb. Like, at most, it would be 2 lineups of CeeDee Lamb, but for me, more likely it'd be 0 or 1 in that spot against the 49ers. For me personally, I'd prefer to look elsewhere for wide receiver, and then tight ends. I don't really like Conklin all that much. Wide receivers, let's talk about the mid-range, Neil, and also something I want to add to this because we're getting some questions about Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp has officially been activated by the Rams. He's expected to play. My expectation is he plays maybe like 50% of the snaps we would typically see, which is enough to do this. It's enough for me to not like Cooper Kupp. I don't think he's going to play enough to have value at his current price, but it's going to take away from guys like Higbee. It's going to take away from guys like Nacua. So on the whole, it is hard for me to get to this Rams passing game. Is that how you feel about the situation as well with Kupp back in the mix, or do you see it maybe a little bit different?
I think I largely see it the same way. Like, it's just like, it's so hard to want to get there. There's a part of me that thinks like it will be super contrarian to go like Stafford, Kupp, Nacua. And I think there's a possibility that Kupp does play like 70-80% of snaps. And we know that he can get a huge target share while he's out there. So I think there's still like a shot at both Kupp and Nacua, each seeing double-digit targets and just completely going off at, I would assume, really, really low combinatorial ownership on the trio. But the more likely scenario is, it's just going to be, he's going to cut into all the other guys you said, throw Tutu Atwell in there as well as somebody that to me now looks almost unplayable at 5,300. It makes it tough. Makes it tough to really want to play anybody from the Rams.
And the other part too, because I see like Alexander Hilbert in the chat is saying that he would still think Puka does good. And like, I'm not going to say that he's not a fantasy viable player the rest of the season or anything like that. But for DFS purposes, he's $8,000 on FanDuel. He's $7,700 on DraftKings. He is super expensive and he still has some ownership too. It's not like people are avoiding Nacua. He is, let me pull up his most
5%.
Yeah. It would be maybe if he was like 1% owned, you'd be like, okay, but like he's still pulling some ownership at a ceiling price point. And his target share has to go down to some extent with Cooper Kupp being in the mix, because the alternative is you're saying Cooper Kupp doesn't get targeted, because the way the Rams offense has gone so far this year, Stafford's only throwing the ball heavily to a handful of guys, to a few guys. It's not like this is a team that's really spreading the ball out. Like, Nacua is getting a lot of those targets. If we're going to see Cooper Kupp now demand a target share, which we have to assume he's going to, it's going to be some of those targets coming from Nacua. But think about it like from a basketball perspective. Right? There's only one ball, only so many guys can shoot. If you have a situation where it's like the Lakers, there's no LeBron James in the day. All right, Anthony Davis has to take more shots. He plays really well, but when LeBron comes back, LeBron still has to take some of those shots. And it's kind of similar in this football scenario. So I'm not going to be playing very much of the Rams. It's a hard situation for me to get to. Mid-range of the wide receiver, though, Neil, what's standing out to you in like the mid-range pricing?
I'll probably play some Pittman, mostly just in my Anthony Richardson stacks. Like when I bet on that passing game, I'm gonna include Pittman there in most of them, I would say. Um, as I said, I think I'm going to play some Zach Wilson here against the Broncos. Definitely going to have a 6,000 Garrett Wilson included in my player pool. Maybe even in some lineups without Zach Wilson, I might still have some Garrett Wilson at 6,000, 12% ownership against that Broncos defense that's just been breaking down during games. Certainly, we've seen Garrett Wilson take advantage of defenses breaking down. I think this is as good of a spot for that as any. I mentioned my interest in Tannehill. I really like DeAndre Hopkins here at 5,700. I think that he's been just like a few just short, like barely missing balls. Like Tannehill barely misses them away from having a pretty good stat line so far this year. He's been targeted a ton. He's 5,700 in a great spot here. So I really like DeAndre Hopkins. I didn't mention CJ Stroud as a quarterback that I was interested in. I think it's sort of interesting, the idea of just going to, it feels too obvious to do like a game stack of like Stroud with Nico Collins, Tank Dell, and Bijan Robinson bring back. Like feels too obvious, but at the same time, that's what won a couple weeks ago with the Chargers. Like that stack felt really obvious, and then it was fairly low owned and went off. So I do want to throw that out there. I do kind of like both Nico Collins and Tank Dell. Both certainly have the ability to pay off these price tags. And we didn't talk about CJ Stroud, but I guess I would throw him out there as one more quarterback that I have some interest in. Jordan Addison, 5,300. Man, he's really interesting to me. He put up a 0 last week, gonna drive down the ownership. We've got him at sub 2% ownership now in a matchup where the Vikings are gonna need to throw the ball to keep up with the Chiefs. Maybe I'm just a homer, but still really appeals to me. Jordan Addison. I don't want to ever think about playing Adam Thielen at above 5,000. It's a tough matchup with Detroit, so I don't think that I'm going to force it in there, but he's been like, his first read target share is like among the highest. It is so frustrating for me as somebody who has faded Adam Thielen, has seen, like, I'm pretty sure he's washed, but like if they're going to pepper him with targets, like he's still going to get there a good amount of the time. But I don't think I'm going to get there a ton. I don't know, maybe Marquise Brown, just 5,000, given the way that he has been used, how good he's been so far this year. He is getting 16% ownership. So I think I'm actually going to be underweight to the field, but like 16% ownership makes sense for a 5,000 Hollywood Brown, given his utilization and his role so far this year, how well he's been doing. So I'll throw that out there. I think I've thrown out, I'll throw out one more name. KJ Osborne is still seeing the field more, like running more routes than Jordan Addison. So I think I prefer Jordan Addison, but it is still frustratingly, KJ Osborne is still like the guy who's out there on the field second most among Vikings receivers. I'll stop myself there and let you chime in here.
All right. So I got my 2 core plays at the cheap end were Wan'Dale Robinson and Khalif Raymond. I've got 3 core plays for me in the mid-range right now. And that is Garrett Wilson, who is fairly cheap, only $6,000 over on DraftKings, and then on FanDuel as well. I like getting to him, even though he is a little bit more expensive. So on FanDuel, it's $7,400. I still get exposure to Garrett Wilson. So Wilson is one of them. The other one for me, who you also mentioned, Hollywood Brown. We've seen him get just a lot of targets, and Dobbs played way better than expected, right? Like he's been somebody who I thought was going to be absolute dog shit this year. And not to say that he's like a franchise quarterback or anything like that, but he's been serviceable. And the Cardinals have been a frisky team. They've been way more competitive than expected. So Marquise Brown, who in terms of targets has drawn 10, 7, and 10 the last 3 games, 27 targets for Hollywood Brown over those last 3 games, and still a fairly cheap price point. So Garrett Wilson, Hollywood Brown, and then the other one for me that I like getting to in the mid-range is DeAndre Hopkins. Just mispriced. I can't remember if you mentioned him amongst your list.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
It's a wrong price point on DeAndre Hopkins. He's $5,700 over on FanDuel, on DraftKings. And then on FanDuel, we've got Hopkins priced at $6,100. I know the production hasn't been there to this point, but you just have to think it's going to get better for this team. Like, there's no way they're going to be this bad. And as bad as they've been, there's still a lot of targets going to DeAndre Hopkins. Treylon Burks is out, which is going to mean even more condensed targets going to Hopkins. We've seen him get as many as 13 targets in a game so far this year. So I really think we're buying low at DeAndre Hopkins because typically this is a guy, even in bad situations in the past, when with the quarterback, he's still relatively normally priced north of $8,000. So now we've got Hopkins just above 6K on FanDuel, just below 6K over on DraftKings. So I like him in the mid-range as well. Very rare that Hopkins is a mid-range receiver, but he is so far this season. So Hopkins, Wilson, those are two guys that I like right around that 6K mark. Pay up wide receivers. What is it that you are prioritizing on the high end, Neil?
On the high end, let me sort by salary here. Justin Jefferson, I'm going to want to go to. I mentioned the Viking stacks, and I'm going to do some probably Viking stacks without Justin Jefferson in there, but he's just been a slam dunk. Like he gets targeted so much. He is so talented, easily the best receiver in the NFL. Don't fight me. I love me some Justin Jefferson, and great spot where they're going to have to be throwing against the Chiefs. He is expensive, which obviously dampens some of my enthusiasm, but yeah, I'm going to be probably around the field, maybe a little bit overweight to the field on Justin Jefferson. I do want to, Cup. I've seen people saying in chat that they want him 100% before we play. I think that the latest that I've seen, and maybe there was a different quote out there, but at one point they said they want him 80 to 90% healthy, and this is October 3rd. They said they didn't feel that he was there just yet on October 3rd, so it's been a few days, but they just said they want him 80 to 90% healthy. So they didn't say they were waiting for, at least in the report that I saw, they didn't say they were waiting for 100% health. So hard to really get to Cup. I'll have interest in AJ Brown. I think I'm going to do some full-on Eagles stacks, and I think AJ Brown obviously going to be a big part of those. One guy that I feel I need to mention is we have Jalen Waddle coming in at just 4% ownership. We've seen this team put up some massive games. The Dolphins, they're in a great spot here against the Giants. Jalen Waddle, the one guy who hasn't really gotten going. Wouldn't be that shocking to me to see the Dolphins go out there wanting to get Jalen Waddle involved. Like, he's one of our star players. We haven't really, he's the one guy who hasn't really had a blow up game. Now we've got a spot where we can pretty much do whatever we want. Wouldn't surprise me to see them focus on Jalen Waddle a little bit more here. And regardless of any kind of narrative, he's just too good. He's 7,500. We've got him projected for 4% ownership. We have him optimal 8% of the time. So as a contrarian play, I really love Jalen Waddle this week.
Yeah, and only $6,800 over on FanDuel. So Waddle is somebody I'm getting to a good amount over on FanDuel, only $6,800. As far as the most expensive wide receivers, by the way, I'm with you also. I like Jalen Waddle. I'm overweight to the field on him on both DraftKings and FanDuel. High end, though, we could pay up for wide receivers this week. There's so much value at the cheap end, and cheap ones that we've talked about, Khalif Raymond, and then also Wan'Dale Robinson. And Robinson, a little bit more so on DraftKings and FanDuel, but still cheap guys available to us. And then overall pricing just a little bit softer on FanDuel, which makes it easier to pay up for guys. But I'm overweight to the field on Justin Jefferson. I'm overweight to the field on Tyreek Hill. I'm overweight to the field on Jamar Chase right now. And by the way, the Chase is even before we have T. Higgins taken out of our projection. So I imagine he's going to be a super important part of my lineups by the time they end up getting there. So yeah, for me, I'm not finding it difficult to get to any of these guys. Jefferson, Hill, Chase, those are going to be my priorities on the high end. Anything else that you want to mention about the pass catchers that you're prioritizing in any way, Neil?
No, I think that we've named. I mean, I mentioned Jalen Waddle. Obviously, you can get to Tyreek Hill also, but Jalen Waddle more interested in me just because he's getting 4% ownership to Tyreek Hill is 23. Like the 23% ownership seems fine to me on Hill. Devontae Smith, similarly, like I mentioned AJ Brown. You can play Devontae Smith in those Eagles stacks as well. I'm sure I'll have some Eagles stacks with Devontae Smith, either with AJ Brown or in place of AJ Brown. Certainly viable, but we've got him 8% projected ownership, 6% chance of being optimal. So not really standing out as like a slam dunk play. I'd say the biggest slam dunk play for me on the high end is just that 4% ownership on Jalen Waddle. To me looks way too low. So he's the one that's going to be probably the biggest priority for me relative to the field. But yeah, I think we've talked about all of the guys on the top end.
Yeah, and then another super chat from Avi. Avi says CeeDee Lamb is $7,400 on FanDuel. Does that change things? No, I mean, that makes him like the seventh most expensive wide receiver. There's just other spots I prefer to go with my wide receiver options than CeeDee Lamb if you're playing that Thursday to Monday slate because there's matchup against the 49ers. So no, I mean, he's super expensive, but that's, one of the more expensive wide receivers on the entire slate.
I do like that. This call out in chat of Rashee Rice. I think he's somebody that I mentioned on the ownership show. I do think Rashee Rice is in play. I said that I might get too cute with Chiefs receivers because I always do, especially in great spots. I think that he is the Chiefs receiver this week that I'm most likely to throw in there as my too cute wide receiver in my Mahomes stacks.
Yeah, we're going to talk about tight ends in a second. It's just going to be Kelce for me when I can. I remember which slate. There was one slate where I had Mahomes stacks, and it was like 98% of them. Do you remember the number, Neil? It was like across FanDuel and DraftKings, I had like 50 Mahomes lineups, and Kelce was in 48 of them or something like that.
That's right.
That's just how I've been playing my lineups this year. I don't trust any of those Chiefs wide receivers individually. Some of them could have upside here and there. I agree with you. If I had to play one, it would be Rice, but I'm more inclined to just go Mahomes to Kelce in my Chiefs stacks when I'm going that route. Avi left us a follow-up super chat. He says that he's losing on Sunday slates, but he's winning on Thursday to Monday. Hey, whatever works. Focus more on the Thursday to Monday slates. That's awesome. What you're cleaning up on. I haven't played a ton of the Thursday to Monday slates, but I have a feeling they're probably a little bit softer than the main slates. Is that something you ever play, Neil?
Yes, not this year. In years past, I don't think I've ever won one, so I probably am not profitable long term. But I do think that there are some. I think a lot of people play them also because they're like, I want exposure to the Thursday night game in a regular slate. So then if you just avoid playing players from the Thursday night game, a lot of the time you can gain leverage because they're all going to be over-owned. But no, I haven't played a ton of them this year, and that could have changed this year too.
Yeah, I would also imagine that for some of those Thursday to Monday slates, it's probably pretty favorable in terms of waiting for the injury news to come out. Now, obviously, for this week, Avi's cleaning up because he played Justin Fields and DJ Moore stacks. But, like how often could he do stuff like just wait for the injury news? And how many people are like not going to play Khalif Raymond because they already have wide receiver spots locked in from Thursday? Right.
Yeah, so I think it is softer.
Yeah, that's at least to me where I would think the most of the value would come from those Thursday to Monday contests. But if you guys want to know the actual best value you can get on any of our packages, if you win a tournament, make sure to add us at Stochastic HOF over on Twitter. Play your DFS contest with the Stochastic avatar, because when you finish in the top 3 of a field, add us on Twitter, and then you get yourself 1 free month of our football package. So all of our stuff included, our lineup generator, our contest generator, everything that we have behind the paywall could be yours 1 month totally for free when you finish atop a GPP and you message us over on Twitter and say like, hey guys, look, I did really well with the avatar. Do that. Get yourself 1 month for free. And then if you're ever looking to sign up for any of our packages, you could also sign up using the link below, and everything is included in our NFL package this year. There's no add-ons or anything like that. We've got everything that you need to win all included under one bundle. So if you're looking to sign up for a football package, use that link below. Tight end time here, Neil. And listen, there's a couple of tight ends that I like a whole bunch this week. I'll make it pretty simple. If I'm paying up for tight end, Travis Kelce. In the mid-range, Sam Laporta. I was already going to like Laporta. I know Lofty's been really high in Laporta this year, and that's been probably his hottest, or I should say his best call over the course of the season from the preseason. He's been all over Sam Laporta. He looks like the next stud amongst tight ends. He's currently the most rostered tight end. So on the high end, if you have the money, you're paying for Travis Kelce. I love Sam Laporta more in that mid-range. And then if I'm going cheaper, I think this is a good bounce back spot for Dallas Goedert. Dallas Goedert is somebody who we've just not seen massively involved in the Eagles passing game to this point. I think that's going to change sooner rather than later. He's had a good rapport with Jalen Hurts in the past. We're looking at him now at a floor in terms of salary. We're also seeing people not playing him as much. So I'm getting to Jalen Hurts a bunch of quarterback. I think it makes sense to pair him with Dallas Goedert, and then as well with some of the other, like Devontae Smith, AJ Brown here and there. And then the other one also, Chigakonkwo for me in the absence of Treylon Burks. So really those 4 tight ends, that's my core at the position. Kelce, Laporta, Goddard, Chigakonkwo. Do you disagree with any of those players, Neil? Is there anybody else you would add to like a core group of tight ends you want to get to?
I don't disagree with any of those. It's probably a fair tight end group for me. Just in my desire to get rid, and I got to say, I was going to throw out Dallas Goedert as somebody that I really love. Also, so glad to hear that you're on the same page. They've also been Sirianni has been saying like he's still going to be a big part of our offense. We need to get him the ball more. So the coach speak continues to be we're going to get Dallas Goedert involved at some point. Now he's 4,200 against the Rams. I think that this could be a blow up spot for Dallas Goedert. So I think that he is among my favorite tight ends as well. I love that call. I would have more interest if it's not Andrew Thomas was active, the offensive lineman for the Giants. Like I was going to absolutely slam the Giants this week if they got Andrew Thomas back, because it's so evident that their offensive line in the last game was just completely broken, but they're still, even with this terrible offensive line, like they still are in a great spot. They've had another week of practicing. Maybe they figure some things out. I'm still taking shots on the Giants, and even separate from my Daniel Jones stacks, I'm gonna play some 5,400 Darren Waller. Like they clearly, like they were started to click in the fourth quarter of the last game. It was like for whatever reason, I guess we kind of know the reason. It's because the offensive line has been so bad that they've been using Darren Waller to block a lot more than we hoped they would. So that is the one concern, is that he's just like, lining up to block to start a play often. And that kind of limits his ability to get out there as a receiver. But 5,400 against a really bad Miami defense in a game where the Giants are going to need to put up points to keep up, I'm going to have some Darren Waller exposure. I throw him in there as somebody else who's going to be a main component of my lineups. I get it if you don't want to play him. The Giants offense did look completely broken. They've in 2 primetime spots this year against the Cowboys too. They've looked so awful. Like I get why people would not want to play them, but I'm going to keep going back there. I think this is a spot where could really pay off to play some Darren Waller. And then of course I'm playing some Kirk Cousins. I'm going to play some TJ Hawkinson at 6,500 also. I have to throw him out there. And finally, one more cheap guy that I have some interest in. Talked about my threw in CJ Stroud to the quarterback discussion. I think you can throw Dalton Schultz at 3,400 in there as well at 3% ownership as somebody that I'm probably going to be overweight to the field on.
Anything else you want to talk about at tight end?
I don't think so. We do have Pat Freiermuth out, so I don't know. I don't think that I would go to any Darnell Washington. Like he's somebody that I've wanted to be a thing, like on showdown slates, but they haven't wanted him to be a thing. So I don't know. Maybe he comes in there and takes on more of a pass catching role with Freiermuth out. He's an enormous rookie tight end, but I don't know that I'm going to get there with Darnold at 0.1% ownership. It's at least worth throwing out there that he's a name you could consider at 0.1% ownership. Maybe he takes on a bigger role with Freiermuth out, but I'm not sure that I'm going to get there.
Yeah. And if you guys haven't done it yet, do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, helps keep all of our content free. The easiest way for us to be supported is just to hit that like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. But here's how we're going to finish the show, Neil, the same way we finish the show every week, which is if you were playing one lineup in a large field tournament, what would be the stack you go to? Quarterback, pass catching options, which direction would you be looking to go?
Yeah, I've gone back and forth on how I was going to answer this. I obviously knew the question was coming. I've given it a lot of thought, and I keep going back and forth. I thought I was going to say the Giants. I think I'm actually going to go Tua to Waddle because I like Waddle so much at low ownership. I'm just going to go to the obvious stack with the less obvious pairing partner with Tua and Waddle. How about you?
So when I was running lineups, I feel like this is a good sign. I was running lineups before the show. FanDuel and DraftKings using our contest generator simulation tool. I got the exact same stack, Neil, as my top overall ROI projected lineup in both FanDuel and DraftKings. It was a Jared Goff double stack to Sam Laporta and Khalif Raymond. I think that that's a great way to go. Khalif Raymond, my number 1 most rostered wide receiver on FanDuel. On DraftKings, he's my 2nd most rostered wide receiver behind Wan'Dale Robinson. I've got Laporta as my most rostered tight end on both sites. I really, really like that stack. It's very affordable. It also has extra target share going to it in the absence of Amon-Ra St. Brown. So that's the way I'm going to be going. And unless anything changes, I assume that's what I'm playing in single entry tomorrow. Is going to be some of those Jared Goff, Detroit Lions stacks. So that does it for us today, guys. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions for us at all, leave them below in the comment section if you're watching after the fact. I have been going out and reading those on Sunday morning to see what it is that you guys have to say. So if any other additional questions, throw them into the YouTube comments. So thank you guys very much for watching. Have a great week and see you next weekend.